Welcome to this presentation of mindfulness meditation and cultivating self-compassion. My name is Mandy Moonland. I'm a registered nurse and licensed massage therapist. I started practicing mindfulness meditation when I came into some serious anxiety, panic attacks, and depression within my own life. And so I'm very passionate about this subject, and I hope that it can help you to put a tool in your toolbox as just another piece of the puzzle to help you through this journey of life. First, we'll start out with some benefits of mindfulness meditation. There's been research out there that shows people that practice this type of meditation has increased patience and compassion. In our fast-paced and instant gratification culture, it's really easy to get distracted. Mindfulness teaches us to practice patience, so it comes more naturally to us when we really need it, especially in times of crisis, chaos, and high stress. Mindfulness also broadens compassion for ourselves and others by helping us suspend self-judgment and to help us bring our attention back to the present moment. It also has been shown to help with productivity and focus. It's really tempting to get caught up in social media, interruptions, negative thinking. So mindfulness helps us recognize distracting thoughts or impulses and lets them pass without indulging in them, as if we're actually observing them instead of becoming them. It also has been shown to heighten body awareness. So we tend to lose awareness of what our body is feeling and telling us when we get really busy or distracted. So with mindful awareness, we can listen to our bodies and react in healthier, purposeful ways, and it gives us a choice on whether we want to continue staying in a type of suffering or if we want to redirect those thoughts into something that's more productive and healthy. Also, it is shown to help cause less stress and anxiety. It helps with stress, and it also helps with anxiety. So by learning how to be more choiceful about what we think about, when we think about it, we can help rewire our brains to reduce stress and anxiety. By creating new neural pathways and redirecting bad habits, whether that be physical habits or maybe just thought patterns. Another one not listed, but I would like to add to the benefit is there have also been recent studies out that show that people that practice mindfulness meditation with the improvement in stress, anxiety, body awareness, compassion, productivity, and focus, they're showing that it also helps to boost the immune system. They just tend to be healthier people. So that's just one of many other things that mindfulness meditation can help you with. So a lot of people ask when I do these presentations is how can I meditate? How do I get rid of my thoughts? And I constantly hear people say, well, I've tried meditation, but I can't do it because I can't get rid of my thoughts. So with that being said, I just want to say meditation can look so many different ways. I know that there's the traditional thought that, you have to be sitting in a certain position with your hands in a certain position and you're supposed to just raise your consciousness and get rid of all of your thoughts. And that is a type of meditation, and it does take a lot of practice and a lot of consistent work. But I'm just here to say that that's not the only way to meditate, and that's not the only way to receive the benefits of meditation. So with mindfulness, I have found that a meditation can be as simple as taking a deep breath in with a slow exhale, as long as you're doing it mindfully. So if you find yourself in a stressful thought pattern or a stressful situation, and you just need to step back, and just that simple just simply recognizing that, and maybe with intention of taking a deep breath in and a slow exhale, maybe doing that 2 or 3 times, that can calm your central nervous system. And it can bring you into a position of just observing and getting more balanced or grounded within yourself. So just the simple act of that would be a type of mindfulness meditation. And so this is an example of what a basic mindfulness meditation would look like. With mindfulness, you always have an intention. And so the intention here would be to just pay attention to your breathing. And then your mind will wander, because when you sit down, or maybe you're walking or standing or doing whatever, you can just focus on your breath. And then once your mind starts to wander, whether it be in the thoughts about the past or the future, or maybe it was an environmental distraction, as soon as you become aware that you had been distracted by those thoughts, you would just gently, gracefully, and compassionately bring yourself back into the breath. And you would repeat that over and over again. And the more often you do it, and the longer you do it, the better the results you will see with your health, mentally, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. So we'll practice this for just a moment. So wherever you're at, maybe you're probably sitting down watching this presentation. So just mindfully be aware of the positioning you're in. And from there, you'll just start paying attention to the natural rhythm of your breath. Just becoming aware that your body automatically does this for you. And notice the natural rise and fall of your chest or abdomen. Become aware of what it feels like when you breathe in through your nose and it travels up your nose, down your throat, and then fills the lungs. And then also becoming aware of the reverse of that. Become aware of the natural rhythm of your breath and the depth. So we'll stay here for just a few moments. And if your mind wanders, just simply bring it back to your breath. And now take a deep breath in. Slowly exhale. And so this is what just a basic, very simple and gentle meditation looks like when you're working with mindfulness. And research is showing that even if you are able to do this for just 5 minutes, it helps with all of the benefits that we talked about earlier. And of course, the more often you do it, and the longer you do it, the less you'll have to be distracted and bring your focus back onto your breath. So in the very beginning, you may notice that you're having to refocus with your breath multiple times. But stay gentle with yourself. Be graceful about it. And then as the time goes on, you'll notice that it just gets easier and easier. So we're going to talk a little bit about the default mode network of the brain. It's that place that we go to when we do get distracted. And they show that with mindfulness meditation, people are able to stay out of the default mode network a little more than normal. And I'll explain why that's important here in a moment. So this default mode network is that mind wandering or the autopilot part of your brain. So this is the part of the brain that, when you can't sleep at night and your mind's wandering at 3 o'clock in the morning and you're thinking about what happened 10 years ago, and you're playing over different scenarios about how it could be better, or you could have done better, or you could have said this, or you could have said that. Or thinking about a problem that you may be facing in the near future, and you're creating all of the what ifs in your brain, trying to figure out what the best option is, and basically creating more problems. So you have one problem, but you're creating 99 problems. Another example of this would be if you had a really stressful day and you were driving home thinking about your stressful day, and say you're driving about 10 miles to your home, and you pull up and you don't remember driving. You just pull up in your driveway and you're like, oh, I don't really feel like I was fully engaged in the moment of driving. That would be on autopilot. So you can only hope that you stopped at all the red lights and the stop signs and turned your signals on and you were safe. So that would be another example of the part of the brain that causes us to go into this default mode network. And so here's an example of what it would look like. It's basically in the center of your brain. And we're going to go over some of these areas of the brain and what they do. And so just to give you a little bit of background of the studies of this, I would say about 25 years ago, they were doing studies, and they had, willing participants in the field of neuroscience, and they had people hooked up to scanners and imaging machines, and they were just figuring out what the brain does when you do specific tasks. For instance, what part of the brain activates or lights up on the images when you are doing this math problem, or when you're thinking about a puppy, or when you are eating, all of these things. And so in that study, they noticed that in between the tasks, when people were just kind of waiting for their next thing to do, they weren't talking to anybody, they were just sitting there waiting and letting their mind wander, so to speak. They noticed that everyone's brain were lighting up in very similar areas. And so, all of the participants' brains were really looking like they were really active in a specific area when they weren't in the middle of doing a specific task, and when they were just letting their mind wander and they were just sitting there thinking. So they got interested in this, and they started looking at those areas of the brain and what was specific and what was of the most interest to those parts of the brain. And they found that, we'll just start over here on the left. They found that the inferior parietal cortex was involved. And this is the part of the brain where we can see images, and we can time travel, as in traveling or projecting into the past or future, or in other words, thinking about the past and the future. Another part of the brain that was lighting up was the posterior cingulate cortex. And this part of the brain also has to do with the time travel or projecting into the past and future. But it also is connected to the hippocampus and the amygdala. And those two areas of the brain are associated with emotions and memories. So far we have a part of the brain that lights up when our mind starts to wander that has to do with thinking about the past and the future, that has to do with emotions and memories. So moving on into the medial prefrontal cortex, this is the part of the brain that likes to think about the self. And next to that is the anterior cingulate cortex. That is also part of the brain that likes to think of the self, but it also likes to look for problems and errors. And then we can move on down to the medial temporal lobe. This is the part of the brain that is also associated with memories and specifically thinking of other people. So far we have a combination of the parts of the brain that likes to think about the past and the future, that is highly emotional and involves memories. It also is involved with thinking about other people and the self, as well as looking for problems and errors. So this is why it's so easily to be distracted and to constantly be thinking about the past and the future and not really staying present in the moment. And again, with research, it has been shown that people that practice mindfulness, it does reduce the activity within the default mode. And so they did also studies that showed people that just were beginning in meditation and people that were, moderately practicing meditation, all the way up to like monks and professional meditators. And they all show that they had a default mode, but they were just the people that practice meditation more were able to recognize that they were in that state and bring it back into the present moment much more easily and much more effective than people that either do not meditate or that are just beginning. Also with this default mode, it can really activate the parts of our brains into self-criticism and shame and creating those what-if scenarios, as well as criticism and judgment for other people. And we're going to talk a little bit here in a moment about why that is not the best thing for your body to be in. Before we leave this section of the default mode network, I do want to discuss, they did look at other animals to see if they had default mode networks, because they were trying to decide or trying to figure out a theory behind why we might have this default mode network, because it's not really a positive thing to have if you just look at it from the surface. But if you dig deeper, looking at examples of animals, specifically we're just going to talk about the rat studies. They show that rats have a default mode network that is associated with the olfactory system, also known as the smell. And so if you think about rats and their ability to smell, it's very, very important for them as a survival means to be able to smell, because they have to be able to smell food in order to eat, as well as smell predators that may be after them. So they link that back as comparative studies to the human species, and notice that this could possibly be a mechanism within our brain to help us to survive, because we are a very social species. We have to be a part of a tribe or a community in order to survive, especially when we're younger. We have to be accepted by our parents in order to survive. We have to be accepted into the family. We have to be accepted by peers as we get older, just to feel connected. Basically, with humans, connection to others is one of the very basic needs of survival. And so the reason why our brain takes us, in theory, to this default mode network is so that we can analyze and correct errors of ourselves, so that we can be connected to other people. So just as a review, the default mode network basically it projects things that aren't necessarily true, and that are not happening right now. It is thinking and finding faults within the self and other people. And if uncontrolled, it can activate shame and fear. And so, with the shame and fear in mind, we need to ask ourselves, what does it mean to suffer? And are we suffering when we're in shame and fear? And to suffer, we can do this on many different levels. We can suffer physically with pain, illness. We can suffer emotionally by sadness and anger, fear and shame. We can suffer mentally from depression, from anxiety, from panic attacks, from feeling disconnected. And we can also suffer spiritually or intuitively. So not being able to trust ourselves, not being able to trust that we're safe, and that there may be a higher being, even if that's the higher self or the universe or God. And so when you look at the aspects of those different systems, the spiritual, the mental, emotional, and physical bodies that we discussed earlier, when it comes to suffering, when we are in a state of suffering, either that being fear or shame, we can activate our sympathetic nervous system. It's that fight or flight response. And there's another aspect to that fight or flight response as well that we don't talk about often, but it's the freeze and the fawning. So sometimes with people, depending on who they are genetically and personality-wise, when they activate the sympathetic nervous system, they have one of these four responses. They either fight, they get defensive, they may run, so the flights, and they may freeze. They may just feel paralyzed, like they can't do anything. And then there's also the part that's fawning, and that's the part of people that want to please people, to make people happy so that they feel safe. And so we're going to take an example here of this little deer, and we're just going to imagine this deer is eating and grazing in a beautiful meadow, just minding his business and eating. And now we're going to imagine that he hears something in the brush and he gets alerted to a possible danger. So in this instance, we're going to say that he is going to take the freeze response of the sympathetic nervous system. So what he does is he looks up, ears start perking up, on high alert, eyes are dilated, and heart's racing, and trying to decide whether or not it's in danger. Does it need to stay there and freeze? Maybe the predator won't see him, or is he going to have to run for his life, basically? So then the deer notices that it is just a little bunny hopping by. He immediately turns that response off. His breathing returns to normal. His heart rate returns to normal. His eyes go back to normal, and he starts grazing again like it never happened, right? So as a human, we don't easily shut off the central nervous system as well. We actually have to be mindful about whether or not we're in a state of the sympathetic nervous system, because we're thinking about the past and the future and creating survival instincts, or making our mind feel like it's in danger when it's actually not. So the next question is, why would it be important to control fear or shame? And we'll go into that. That's a very important question. Why would it be important to control that fear or shame on a constant level? So this is a brain imagery from a study that they did that we'll talk about in just a moment. But if you look at this is the top part is physical practice of someone physically playing a piano. And the bottom part is a mental practice, someone that's just imagining playing the piano. And if you notice, the brain responded in a very similar way. So with more details, volunteers were asked to play a simple sequence of piano notes each day for 5 consecutive days. Their brains were scanned each day in the region connected to the finger muscles. Another set of volunteers were asked to imagine playing the notes instead, also having their brains scanned each day. Images of the scans show clearly that the changes in the brain in those who imagined playing piano are the same as in those who actually played piano. So your brain doesn't distinguish real from imaginary. Okay? The stress response involved in humans to give us the ability to fight or flee when faced with danger. This creates chemicals including cortisol, adrenaline, that help kickstart the body, pushing blood towards the major muscles to give us strength. But the exact same stress response kicks in when you imagine danger, also producing cortisol and adrenaline and pushing blood around the body. The same chemistry is produced regardless of whether the danger is real or imagined. That is huge. So you can control the chemistry within your body with your thoughts. The same chemistry is produced whether you are in actual danger or you are just imagining it. So, that being said, what does all of this mean in real life? It means that what you imagine to be happening is actually happening as far as your brain is concerned. So, if we are thinking about things that cause stress, either past events or things in the future, we are creating the chemicals within our body that causes cortisol and stress hormones to be released. And if you've done any research or know just basic biology, you know that this is not very healthy. It lowers our immune system. It causes nervous system disorders. It can cause anxiety and panic attacks, digestive disorders. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. So it's really important that we're mindful of our thoughts and where we are wanting to be, and making sound and beneficial, healthy choices of where we want to be taking the chemicals and the chemistry within our body. And so a really great way to bring down that central nervous system when it's in that fight, flight, freeze, or fawning mode is to do a 5 senses meditation and this is a mindfulness meditation as well. So if you recognize that you're in this default mode and you've activated your sympathetic nervous system into a stress response, you can take a deep breath and just kind of step back and take a moment for yourself. It doesn't take long. It can take 5 minutes. It could take 20 minutes, however long you would like to do that. But it's a 5 senses meditation. And what I do is I just start with a really grounding breath, taking a deep breath in through the nose and exhaling through the mouth. And maybe do that 2 or 3 times. And then once I feel somewhat grounded, I can just pay attention to what I'm seeing. So we're bringing ourselves back into the present moment. It's just reminding your brain that, okay, we're not in that place we were 10 years ago. Or we're not in that place in 2 weeks when I'm having to go through a stressful interview or whatever the case is, right? So you can do this with your eyes closed, noticing the sight behind your closed eyes, noticing if you see any patterns behind your closed eyes or colors coming through or images. You can also do this with your eyes open, just noticing specific things within the room, different colors, textures of curtains or clothes that might be around, different colors of the furniture, surfaces, whether they're rough or smooth, just looking and really noticing every detail of the space you're in. And from there, you could go into just focusing on sound. So the sounds that's, maybe you can hear the cars driving by outside the window, or maybe you can hear kids laughing in the background, or any noise. And you want to take this from the approach of not needing to control anything at this moment, and just allowing things to be, unless of course you're in danger or someone else is in danger. But we are talking in the context that this is a safe environment. From the sound, you could move on to scent. So just breathing in and noticing any scents that you may be able to smell. And then from there, you can notice sensations of touch. So noticing the most subtle sensations of touch, whether that be, a little bit of hair brushing up against your neck or your forehead. Maybe you could feel the jewelry around your fingers, or if you have a necklace on, can you feel your earrings? Can you feel your clothes on your body? And also you could take it to, if you're sitting down, just noticing the hard surface beneath you and the support that you have. And then you can take it into taste. So just noticing if you have any taste in your mouth, also noticing the environment of your mouth. So is it dry? What's the positioning of your tongue? Is your jaw clenched and tight? And if you can, choose to soften that. And once you go through each individual sensation, you could bring in all 5. So just bringing in all 5 of these aspects into your awareness, noticing at the same time the sight, sound, scent, touch, and taste. Once you do that, you would just take another deep breath in, and then releasing everything out. Just imagining stress leaving your body. So that would be a really great example of a 5 senses meditation. So now we're going to move into the compassion part of the presentation. And so compassion, of course, is going to be for the self and for others. And we always want to use kindness as an anchor in compassion. And so some important things to know is, for you, you need to know what causes suffering for you. And also, if you're involved with other people, say your spouse or your children or your coworkers, what causes them suffering. And also, it's important to know what you care about. So these are some questions that we can ask to really dig a little deeper into those aspects of knowing what causes suffering, as well as knowing what we really truly care about. And these things can change over time. So as we grow older, these things will change. So it's really important that we come back to these questions as we transition through the different chapters of our lives. So what happens, and we're thinking about the aspects of right now, because this could be very different from where you were 2 months ago, 6 months ago, a year, 2 years, 3 years. And it may be different, if you have a major life transition or change in the near future as well. So always come back to these questions, because they can change depending on where you're at in life. So what happens when you give in to self-criticism and shame? So if you think about when you're in that state of self-criticism and that state of shame, what happens to you? Does it make you feel good? Does it make you feel bad? Does it make you more productive or less productive? Does it make you feel fearful? And does giving in to shame create suffering within? Another question would be, what happens when you are suffering? So what does it feel like to suffer? And what physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually happens to you when you're suffering? How can you recognize when you are in a state of suffering? I know there's been times in my life that I was so disconnected that I could go all day long feeling very anxious and on the verge of a panic attack, with just not even recognizing that it was time to stop what I was doing and change direction. So also another question is, what is something about yourself that matters most to you? And these are just some examples, but think about these and similar aspects of what really matters to you. Is it freedom? Is it health? Being accepted? Is it having compassion for others and others having compassion for you? Is it your family? Maybe it's self-care and being loved or to love people. Is it having meaningful work? Or maybe it's just simplicity in your life and a sense of peace. So you may have multiple things, but put them in order. What is the most important? And then what mission, purpose, or community do you serve? So would this be, are you at home with children and that's the community that you serve? Or are you part of the military and that's the community that you serve? Maybe you are in holistic coaching or teaching, or maybe in the fields of nursing. Whatever it is, notice what mission or purpose or community do you serve? And why is it important to you that you serve these missions, purposes, and community? And do you need to reprioritize this within your life? Do you always choose what matters most to you in life to guide your choices? So thinking back on those things that we discussed earlier about freedom, peace, simplicity, love, family, meaningful work, etc. Taking your top, most important things to you, do you always make choices that guide those things? And if you can't say honestly, no, all my decisions are not based on the things that matter most to me, what do you use to guide your choices? Is it shame or fear? Just becoming aware of that. And what does it mean to be kind to yourself? And why does it matter to you that you're kind to yourself and to others? So after analyzing and answering those questions and knowing the information that you know about the default mode and about the sympathetic nervous system and how our brain works, can you express self-compassion as a vow or commitment to yourself? And if you can, this is one practice that has really helped me, and it's mindful compassion. So with the example, this is very similar to the breath meditation that we did in the very beginning of the presentation, where we just focus on our breath and then we get distracted and we recognize that and bring it back to the breath over and over and over again. You can also use this with your intention. Instead of being your breath, your intention would be to have compassion, either for yourself or others or both. So in the morning when I wake up, I make it my intention to stay in compassion for myself and those around me. And then throughout the day, I'm being mindful of this, and that is my intention for the day. At some point during the day, I may fall into the trap of self-criticism when high stress comes in, or frustration comes in, or I may be critical of others. And so that comes in. As soon as I acknowledge that current criticism, I just redirect it back into kindness and self-compassion. And when you notice that you have been distracted and that you've gotten off into like a self-criticism or criticism of others, you can take a self-compassion break. And an example of this would be a loving touch. So, for instance, for me, I always take my hand and place it over my heart when I need a little self-compassion break if I've been really hard on myself or others, and just take a deep breath in. And that sign of just placing my hand on my heart is a sign of self-compassion, because I choose it to be. So that self-compassion break can look however it does to you. So know what causes suffering, know your intentions, and also you can use loving touch. So an example of this, so when I notice that I've stepped out of compassion and into criticism, I just acknowledge it. I take a deep breath or two, take a mental note of my 5 senses, and I redirect. I choose to bring myself back to self-compassion, because I am at my best for others and myself when I am in self-care. In compassion, I know that we can create a world of more joy, peace, and love. So that's my mission statement. That is my purpose statement. That's the community that I serve, those around me. And so that's how I can bring myself back into that state of compassion mindfully. So if you enjoyed this information and you would like to research further into mindfulness and different ways that you can practice it, some resources that I have used along the way is Jon Kabat-Zinn. He is an excellent teacher. He has wonderful meditations out there. He does lectures that you can find on YouTube that it really explains in detail why mindfulness is so beneficial. And he does take it on a scientific level. There's Joseph Goldstein. He is also he's actually one of the pioneers that brought mindfulness into the Western culture from the East. He is attached to the Buddhist side of the practice, so he does talk a lot about Buddhism. So if you don't mind that, he is a great resource to have. He's been doing it for many years. He has wonderful meditations on YouTube as well as lectures. There's also Dr. Dan Siegel. He's one of my personal favorites. He is a neuroscientist, and he talks about the science behind it, the health behind it, the biology behind it, and a lot of brain information. So I've never really known him to mix in any kind of religion or faith within the practice. He's also very knowledgeable and teaches a lot about children and how their brain develops, and how we can support them as they grow through different stages in their life. Another great resource is Kelly McGonigal. She is a neuroscientist and a professor at Harvard. She has wonderful information on the studies on how to basically make stress your friend. She has information of joy and movement, using willpower to get through habits. She teaches mindfulness as well, and yoga. And this next one, I cannot remember how to say his name, and I don't want to say it wrong. So jot that down, look him up. He's amazing. He is a Buddhist monk. He has many books that are on the subject of mindfulness. Just a wonderful, wonderful teacher and great resource to dive into the state of mindfulness. And then there's Tara Brock, also a wonderful teacher. She has many lectures out there. And I believe she also is connected to the Buddhist tradition as well. So you can make it what it works for you. You don't have to attach any type of religion or thought process to it as far as spirituality or Buddhism or anything. You can just make it your own. But there is science behind it that it does work. So, that being said, thank you so much for listening and participating in the presentation. You can visit my website at www.mymoonwellness.com. I do offer services of massage therapy, meditation, spirituality coaching, reflexology, and Reiki. Thank you again for following this presentation, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. Thank you so much.